All right. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Higher Ed Power BI user group. Sorry, I fumbled my words there. Again, a word of apology to anyone who doesn't like Notre Dame, but when I was a kid, I really loved the movie Rudy, and in part because of the soundtrack, Jerry Goldsmith's soundtrack, so amazing, so inspirational, and so I just had to play that. I just love that music. So anyway, hey, welcome back. Glad to have everyone. If you're with us for the first time, we're very glad to have you. And to the new members, I like to just kind of state very quickly the mission of this user group: to train, educate, and connect data professionals who work with Microsoft Power BI at colleges and universities. Um, the vision for the future of this group: continue to have these monthly virtual meetings and hopefully do some in-person meetups at conferences before long. I think we missed the boat on EDUCAUSE, but AIR Forum coming up in May, HEDW in April, I believe. There are possibilities to meet up in person with other Power BI professionals, and this could be a forum to do that. And again, active participation from the group. We've had a really strong start this year to this group. We've had several volunteer speakers and collaboration across institutions. And of course, I'd like to see that going. If you're joining us for the first time, my name is Pete Benbow. I work at Davidson College, where I'm the manager of data operations. And I started this group a few months ago to try and facilitate these kinds of conversations and collaboration between institutions. I was a guest of a Tableau user group not long ago, and it kind of inspired me to get one started for Power BI as well. I like to kick off all of these meetings with a quick update of where we are in terms of the Power BI service and Power BI report server. So what versions are we on? So the Power BI service, literally just before this meeting, Microsoft put out some blog posts about the November 2023 Power BI updates. So right now, my slide says that the latest version is October 2023, and that's still technically true until they update the download links, but there will be some blog posts that I'm going to circulate after the meeting that talk about some of the new features that we have in the November 2023 version of Power BI Desktop, which should be coming out today, should be available for download today. So I won't go over the features of October 2023 because we already did that in the last meeting. That is available on our YouTube channel. But I will say that, the updates for the cloud were, they were okay. We got the DAX calculation groups now being able to be authored in Power BI Desktop, which is great. Power BI Report Server still on September 2023. Power BI Report Server, as a reminder, only gets updated every 4 months. So it's going to be stuck on this version until January at the least. And anyway, the September 2023 update for Power BI Report Server was so incredibly lukewarm. It was just like full screen view now available and some improvements to the mobile layout editor. Really not an impressive release for Report Server, but as I mentioned, big news coming out of the Microsoft Ignite conference today with Power BI in the cloud, so stay tuned for that. Quick announcements. So first of all, congratulations to the group on reaching over 300 members in only 3 months. We started this group in August, and now we're, as of like an hour ago, we're up to 325 members, which is great. So thank you to everyone for showing up. I've been overwhelmed by how popular this has gotten. I also wanted to throw a quick shout out to Geoff Koch, who is our speaker today at the University of Miami for agreeing to join me as a co-organizer of this group. Geoff, I really appreciate you doing that. And if there's anyone else who would be interested in joining as a co-organizer of the group, let me know. We could use multiple voices, determining kind of content and format, and kind of maybe putting together meetups at different conferences. So if you're interested in becoming a co-organizer, please reach out to me. The next monthly meetup is December 20th, 2023. That's already on the calendar. If you go to meetup.com, you will see, hopefully, that it's out there. If not, I will publish it after this meeting. So as usual, my monthly encouragement to contact me if you would like to volunteer to speak on a topic. It doesn't need to be Power BI related. This is a Power BI user group, but it might be interesting to have someone talk on a Tableau topic or Looker, or just comparing some of these products maybe something that's more Excel related. Doesn't matter. But if there's something that you would like to speak on after the meeting, pay attention to your email inbox. I'll send out a link to the form where you can submit an idea and I will reach out to you. As I mentioned a second ago, stay tuned for Power BI announcements coming out of the Ignite conference this week. You can keep up to date with announcements from Microsoft by going to powerbi.microsoft.com/blog. And there's a little button on there that says subscribe by email. Click on that, put in your email address, and you will get an update anytime Microsoft publishes a new blog post about Power BI or Microsoft Fabric. Moving on. This is a shameless plug. I'm going to apologize for this, but if there's anyone out there who wants to learn Power BI fundamentals and you don't know where to go get training, I want to point you towards a course that I teach on edX.org. It's called Analyzing and Visualizing Data with Power BI. I started teaching this course in 2020, and we just updated the content back in September. Totally brand new content in September, but it's hands-on, self-paced approach. It's 4 weeks long, and that's a generous 4 weeks. I mean, it's not really 4 weeks, but it's self-paced. You can do it at whatever pace you need. And it's all Power BI. It's learning how to use Power BI Desktop and the Power BI service in the cloud. And as a bonus, from now until November 29th, you can get 20% off of this course using the code Cyber23 that you see in the bottom left corner of the screen. So that's edX.org. And that's just if you're looking for some fundamental training on Power BI. Again, that's a little self-serving because I teach the course, but if you are interested, that's one potential resource that you can use. So, all right. Next, after the meeting, look out for an email containing links to the November 2023 feature summary from Microsoft. I'll link to the Power BI course on edX, the YouTube channel, our Slack workspace, links to submit a topic or to volunteer to speak at an upcoming meeting, and of course, to RSVP for our next meeting on December 20th. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Geoff, who is our presenter. I'll ask that if you have questions for Geoff, put them in the chat window, and I will basically be the moderator, and I'll put those questions to Geoff as we go along. Geoff is the Director of Data Analytics in the Office of Institutional Research and Strategic Analytics at the University of Miami. Geoff, I didn't bring your whole bio over here to read aloud, but if anyone wants to know Geoff's bio, I'll put his website out there in the chat in a little bit, and it's also available on meetup.com. But Geoff is going to talk to us today about Power BI reports from scratch. He's going to connect to an iPad's data set and build a Power BI solution from scratch using that iPad's data. So I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let Geoff take over at this point.
Thanks, Pete. No need to shut up, as you say. Everybody's input is valuable. So hey, everybody. I just wanted to echo what Pete said about his thoughts on learning Power BI. Right. So I would definitely go to his course. He didn't put me up to this. Go to his course. Go to it because learning Power BI is very valuable, and I'd say that from experience. So just to give you a little bit of background from where I came from. I used to work at an institution, American Public University System, and we used Tableau. We were a Tableau shop. I used Tableau for years and years, right? And so then when I came to University of Miami, we had Power BI as our enterprise platform. We still use Tableau a little bit, but Power BI was the enterprise platform. While there are some similarities, the architecture, the infrastructure, and really the DAX is completely different than the calculation language that Tableau uses. There are a lot of differences too, right? So I would encourage everybody. I know in the chat there was somebody asking about the Tableau user group. If you are interested in learning both and using both, please do not think that they are the same, right? Don't use Power BI as you would Tableau. Don't use Tableau as you would Power BI, right? So I think they are completely different tools. They have their own good use cases, but to give you some background, I had to basically not relearn everything, but I had to learn a new tool and learn some new fundamentals that I realized I had been shirking a little bit when I was using Tableau. So what we're going to do, or what I'm going to do today, is I'm going to walk you through, and I'll start sharing my screen now. I'm going to walk you through Power BI from scratch, right? We're going to create this report using iPad's data. Here it is. It's already made, and I'm going to cheat a little bit and pull it up on my other monitor so I have something to reference. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to go from soup to nuts. We're going to go get the data, pull it in, and build a report using some of the features that Power BI has that maybe you know about already, maybe you don't know about, but they were helpful for myself and my team, for those that didn't know it, right, about how to engage with our users and really create this report that enhances their user experience with it. So here's what we're going to create. As Pete said, we're going to be using iPads data. So none of this is private, right? This is all publicly available to everybody. And we're actually going to be referencing the iPads access databases that are publicly available out there on their website as well. If you don't know where that is, we can tell you later. Those databases, I would encourage you to dig into them. They can be a little bit complex, but the value or the information there is incredibly valuable, right, for benchmarking, and then we can develop tools on top of that for whenever they update it, and it's really cool. So here's what we're going to build. Some of this may be redundant, but again, this is just for demo's sake, and this is a live demo, I will say, so I'm going to be clicking around and we can have some conversations around that, but it is valuable for those that are interested in it. So here's what we're going to create. I'm going to go to page 1 over here and start from scratch. Now, to connect the data, we can't build a report unless we have data to build it on top, right? So what I'm going to do first is we will go to get data, and then if I were truly starting from scratch, and I'll tell you why I'm not, I would go to more, and we want to connect to our access databases first, because that's where our data lives. You then click connect, and you'd import your tables, and it would all be fine there. That takes a little bit of time because some of these databases and tables are big. So these are already imported. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to transform data up here, and I'll show you sort of what we've imported already, and I'll walk you through each of the steps that we have in Power Query. So if you don't know, when you import data and you want to transform it or load it into your data model, I guess actually the semantic model now, into the semantic model in Power BI, it opens up in Power Query. So here's Power Query. It's a separate window, as you can see right here. And you can see I have all my data sources over here, or the queries as they call them. One thing I would strongly recommend when you are dealing in Power BI and you have multiple tables that you're importing or at least connecting to, group them according to whatever the theme is that you're grouping them. Organization is key here, especially with all these tables and queries that we have. As you can see, I grouped these I'm highlighting right here. These are all iPads tables. They may seem familiar to some of you. I've imported them in here for the 2019, 2020, and 2021 data sets. As you can see, I've grouped them under the source folder right here. We can go ahead and collapse that if we'd like. They're all under the source because here are our source data. We're going to take this and we're going to do stuff with it, right? So the first things first, let's say we imported HD 2021. You can go over here in the query settings and the applied steps in Power Query and look at the steps that you've taken. As you can tell here, we've imported a table, and this is everything that we're referencing right here within the 2021-22 truncated access database. I truncated it. There's a lot more tables in the actual version of it. But you can see here, it imports all these tables. And then this next step, you don't have to input these steps manually, by the way. This just does it automatically. But it's nice to see each individual step represented here in the applied steps pane. And you can see I imported HD 2021, and this is our source right there. Okay. Another thing that you can also do, if you're a truly advanced user, you can open the advanced editor and start typing in what's called, this is the M code, right? You can start typing this in if you'd like, and really do everything you want. You don't need to rely upon the GUI within Power Query if you don't want to, but I am not an advanced M writer, so I just rely upon the GUI most of the time. And then I'll look up some things with on the great wide web to sort of change some of the M query if I really want to. So anyway, we have our sources right here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these and create what I'm calling these staging queries right here. We're going to want to look at fall enrollment, 12-month enrollment, and total conferrals, right? And we're going to use this to benchmark. We're going to use this to benchmark against other institutions. So the first thing I'll do, we look at the fact fall enrollment. I'm creating a fact table here, my own little version of a fact table. And one thing I'll point out is I'm essentially unioning. I'm unioning the EF 2021 and EF 2020 and 2019 tables, and I'm creating a column here that delineates the year for each table. So that way we can easily see, okay, this one comes from 21, this one comes from 20 and 2019, and allows us to add another column right here called unit ID year, which later on down the line under this fact institutional metrics query, we use it to join or merge within Power Query the other tables and the other metrics that we're pulling right here based on the unit ID and the year. The unit ID in this case is each institution's ID within IPEDS, if you didn't know. After we do that, we're filtering to EF level equals 10. And again, the applied steps, you just click on them and it tells you exactly, similar to Excel, right? You can see the formula up at the top in the bar, formula bar. EF level 10, for those, if you're wondering why I do that, EF level 10 is equal to the total enrollment. It's the total fall enrollment. I don't want to, this data set has a total row, right? We don't want to just put in all the rows. We want to make sure that we're accounting for that total row. So I'm limiting it to only that total row, renaming some columns here, and then removing columns that I really don't, quote unquote, care about for this. And you see, here's our final data set for fall enrollment. Similar things are done with 12-month enrollment, as you can see here. And then fact total conferrals. And so one thing that happened, I'll show you once this gets done loading. I'm grouping right here. Please load. The reason I didn't want to load in all the data sets for everybody, by the way, is because who wants to watch data sets load in? Nobody wants to do that. Like, just load it in. This is already preloaded here. So anyway, so I'm loading them in here. I'm removing columns. But then I have this extra step that doesn't exist in the other two queries here. And it's called, I'm calling it grouped rows, right? We're grouping them. If you're familiar with SQL, right, this is essentially like a group by. And let's see if I click on the little setting icon here. Here we go. You can see, okay, I want to group by unit ID year and unit ID year, which is the wonderful column I created there. Creating a new column called total conferrals, and I'm summing this column, C total T. And that's because of the way the data set is formatted here. So, but just, FYI, if you're in here, you can do all of this within Power Query, especially in import mode. There's some limitations in direct query mode, so keep that aware. Unless your query folds, and if you don't know what that means, please look it up. But basically, if you're using import storage mode, you should be able to use Power Query and all of its abundant functions there. So I did mention, I'm grouping it right here. So now we have our 3 staging tables. One thing that happened, you can see this little question mark here. This doesn't mean there's not an error. So if I go back, you can see there's a little message here saying, hey, the preview refresh was canceled. That's because I went to another query here. If we want to refresh it again, just click up here, click refresh preview, and then it will refresh eventually. And then you'll see this question mark's gone. So, fear not, if you're a beginner and you're going into here and you see that question mark, doesn't mean that there's a problem. It just means that the preview wasn't refreshed properly. So this is good to go here. So now our staging's done, our sourcing is done. Now let's go to what I'm calling final, right? This is, or production, if we really want to call it that. This is production level stuff right here. I'm going to dim directory information, which is what I'm calling it. But basically you'll see, and I'm taking the source here, HD 2021 table. The reason for this is rather than getting a year for each of this directory information for the institutions, I'm just getting one master list, the most recent for the institutions right here. And I'm going to get a lot of information from that table there. Adding in a custom column, unit ID year. I kept this here. I don't necessarily need it though, because I'm not necessarily relating to it in the semantic model on the back end, but I kept it here for giggles, so to speak. But then we rename columns, and I'm doing that here. And essentially, this is our data set right here. I'm keeping a lot of information for dim directory information because, full disclosure, when I was creating this, I didn't know what I would like to use, so I just kept everything. So I just kept it here. I could go in and remove other columns that I didn't need ultimately, which I would recommend you do if you are creating this in production to save some space, but we don't need it anymore. And this is just a demo. So next thing I do, this is something new. So within the IPEDS database, they give you, in your download, it downloads a zip file, they give you this tables doc. And it's an Excel reference list, essentially, of the values. So there's a lot of code values here. Remember, EF level 10. What does that mean? Well, it tells you right here in the table doc. So essentially what I did is I imported that table doc. And you can see here, there's these different sheets within the Excel table right there. Going here all the way down to where I need the highest degree offered value. And what I'm going to do later on is I'm going to dynamically relate these code values to code values in our data set, and you'll see that in the semantic model, to get this highest degree offered label. So similar to a left outer join to a dim table in SQL, that's what I'm doing here within Power BI. Same thing here with institutional category label or values right there. And then these last two are a little fun. This is particularly fun. This is something I created for something that we're going to build within our report. This is each institution, their unit ID. Well, each institution within our subset. Spoiler alert, we're going to be subsetting it to private institutions in Florida because University of Miami is a private institution. But I looked up primary colors and their hex code for each institution that's in our little subset. And what I'm going to do with that later is dynamically create this conditional formatting rule to where the bars and the values and then the circles or the bubbles within our maps are all based on this rule right here. And it'll essentially look it up and say, hey, if this color hex code is this, return that color. And that way we can add a little personalization, right, to our report. So I did this manually. Terribly boring, but important if you want to spice up your report. And then the last thing I did here. So this is, quote unquote, the most complex thing I did. I wouldn't necessarily call it complex, but it is the most complex thing I did here. And it's taking all of these staging tables and, as you can see here, joining them via a merge. So if we go to home, click merge queries, you could then merge things together. This is similar to a join, if you want to think of it like that. And I'm merging the fact fall enrollment, and you can see here join kind left outer right there. And I'm merging it to the where am I merging it to? This is where the live demo comes into play right here. Fact fall enrollment to 12-month enrollment right here, and then to conferrals right there. There we go. So at the end, it's giving me this. I'm going to refresh, and I promise this is the last step in the data piece of this in Power Query. I know this isn't the most exciting stuff, but while this loads, let me tell you what I learned. Remember I mentioned, don't try to replicate what you do in Tableau and Power BI. What I mean by that is Power BI, really understanding the star schema, understanding, relating tables in the back end and how it works within Power BI is really important. Within Tableau, there's not really as much, I would say, of an emphasis on relating things. Oftentimes, I would just simply shove in a custom SQL query and we'd be good to go. But I will say Power Query is a lot like Tableau Prep, if you're familiar with that, and that you can do a lot of things, but then relating to everything in the back end is really crucial. We don't want to rely upon, as a best practice, a ton of DAX, columns and measures right within our report if we don't have to. So if you can do everything upstream or as much as you can upstream in the database layer or within Power Query, I would do that. Get your data set ready to go. Spend 80% of your time making sure that your data is formatted correctly and that it's in the proper structure and related correctly, and then start building your report in Power BI, and things will go very swimmingly. Otherwise, you'll constantly battle that.
Hey, Geoff.
Yeah.
First of all, that's really good advice. Try to push your transformations as far upstream as you can. Second of all, I was going to recommend, while we wait for this to load, if you go to the View tab on Power Query and use the Query Dependencies feature that's over on the right-hand side, we can get a graphical representation of how all of these queries relate to each other. You have to do a little bit of zooming and scrolling and so on. But for those of you who haven't worked with Power Query before, who are not aware of this feature, the Query Dependencies feature gives you this graphical representation of how all of the queries fit together. You can't really organize it the way you necessarily want to, but you can see that on the top row, Geoff has his different data sources, because you can see the C drive path to the access databases. And then you can see the different queries that he's pulling out. And then you can see the lines kind of tracing towards where they converge to create his fact table and other entities that are going to end up in the final data model. This feature is actually going to be going away soon. It's going to be replaced by the new Power Query editor, which is going to have a fully interactive diagram view inside of it, which will be a lot better than this. But I did want to point this out for anyone who isn't familiar, that this is a good view when you're working with complex queries to know how all of these building blocks fit together.
So one of those people that doesn't know about it, Pete, is myself. So that was a pretty good tip. Because yeah, as I was saying, hey, what did this join to? Could have just gone here, and you can clearly see, hey, how do things join to each other, and how's it work? So yeah, that's a great tip. Oh, and when you click on it, again, didn't know about this. So live demo, everybody. Click on it, you can see how things are related here. So you can see, yeah, this is pretty cool. Sad to see it'll go away, but I'm anxious to see what it gets replaced by. I'm sure it'll be great.
Yeah, the diagram view that's coming, it's currently available in Power Query Online when you use Power BI data flows. So you can see it there, but they're bringing that feature to Power BI Desktop, and it's going to be way better than even this. But I hope everyone finds that useful.
So this loaded in the back end, finally. So you basically see here we have our unit ID, again, institution ID, the year that we're looking at, our little combined field there. And then we have our fall enrollment, 12-month enrollment, and total conferrals based on the staging queries that we had over there. So we can say, hey, with confidence, our data tables have been correctly loaded in. We've queried them and we've cleaned them. Now I'm going to click close and apply. And we can look in the model view in the back end now. So the model view is right here. And you can see what I've done. I've hidden these. So these are the queries that we looked at before. I've hidden these from view because I don't necessarily need them to build our report. So I've hidden them from the view, which you'll see if I go to report view. Right here in the data, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, there's a fifth one here. Well, there's a sixth one here that we'll get to why that's even there. But there's 6 that are showing. As you can see, everything has this little icon. Let me zoom in a little bit. See how that looks like an eye with a cross right through it, meaning it's hidden there. But then this doesn't show that, and it's visible within the report view there. So it's important, really, organization. I'm somewhat of a stickler for organization, and it really helps when you're building these and you have a ton of different tables to reference. Trust me, anybody who's worked in a cube, right, a tabular model or anything, and it has a ton of different tables there and references, it's difficult to find which one to look at. So if you don't need these, hide them and just do yourself a favor. But anyway, so I've shoved those over here. Don't really need those. The ones we do need, I've started relating. This is, I guess you could call it somewhat of like a snowflake schema. It's not a star schema, but we have our fact table here, and then a dim that relates to the fact, and then dims that relate to that dim, right? So it's similar to like a snowflake schema, but it's not everybody wants to create a star schema. I'd love to, but we ended up with snowflake, and that's star schema, right? So, or a star schema cousin, I should say. So anyway, we've related the dim directory information. If I click on that, you can see it's related on unit ID to our fact. And then from here, you can see it's 1 to many. So there are many unit IDs, 3 to be exact, because it's unit ID in year, and there's 3 distinct years, but only 1 unit ID here, right? So the 1 to many relationship exists. And then you can see here 1 to many as well. For institutional category, there's multiple of the same code value. Same thing with dim highest degree. And then our institution colors are related on unit ID. And you can see if I click that here, you can see it's unit ID 1 to 1. Cross-filter direction is both. One thing I'll point out here, I'm not going to be doing this within the report. You can change this to both, 1 to many. Or if you're really, chaotic neutral, I guess you could call it, and you have a many-to-many relationship and you change this to both cross-filter direction, be prepared to wait a while because the performance will dip, and I would never suggest that to anybody. But read up more about this cross-filter direction if you want to know a little more about if your performance is lagging. Maybe you have some, it's both on a many-to-many. Please check that out because that does impact your report performance. So we have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different tables here that we've loaded. And this 6th one I'll get to in a little bit. I'm calling this dynamic measure, and that is actually a parameter that we're going to, a field parameter that we're going to be entering a little later. All right, so we have our data. It's related. We're good to go. Now we can get to the exciting part. We can start building this thing, and let's move into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a bar chart. I'm going to create a simple bar chart based on the institution name and then the fall enrollment. Or maybe we want to select the 3 different types of measures that we want. And so that's what we're going to do. So if we have up here, I'm not going to delete this because that will cause a lot of havoc, but we want our users to be able to select either from fall enrollment, 12-month enrollment, or conferrals. We don't want to show all three at the same time because that's just not the demo we're doing right now. We want them to be able to select one at a time and then have that interact with every other visual that we have within our report. So how do we do that? Enter field parameters right here. I'm going to go ahead and create one right here. It's already created on the side, but I'll just show you how to do it in case you're curious. I'm going to click Fields over here under Modeling, New Parameter, and then Fields. Call this Fields Parameter. Very descriptive, I know. So we'll do this. I want to be able to select from, where's our institutional metrics? From these three right here. I want the users to be able to select either 12-month enrollment, conferrals, or fall enrollment. I'll click Create, and you can see it's working on it. On the right-hand side, pay attention, it will load in a new table. And remember, I call that Fields parameter. It loads this in, and now it looks like we can just select these. It's a slicer, you know? So I can go here. I'm going to go to More Options. I'll click on, let's see, Slicer Settings. I want this to be a tile instead. And we can just rearrange that, and it is responsive, so we're good to go there. And now what I'll do is I'm just going to go and let's see. I want to build a, what I say, bar chart. Let's build a bar chart. And I'll go name, institution name, add that right here. And we need to be able to add a measure here. It's looking for a measure on the x-axis. Well, that fields parameter I just added, I'm going to go ahead and just drag it over to x-axis. And you can see it added all three of them. But when I select this, boom, conferrals, fall enrollment, 12-month enrollment, it dynamically changes to what we want. And of course, you can reformat all of this and edit the customization there with it. But the important thing is now we have a parameter that increases the interactivity within our report. So as I said, notice the title also changes with it. That's I think, a very important thing to bring up. You can have this selected, but if somebody exports just that chart and it doesn't have that in the title, you know, it really becomes confusing because people don't know what they're looking at. So that's a really important feature to bring up. Now, I'm going to delete this off here because, as I said, I've already created the dynamic measure over here. I'm going to delete here from the model what I created, but I did want to walk that through because it's vital for this report and what I'm going to be building, and I figured everybody should know at least how to make those. So what we are going to do is, I didn't lie to you, we are going to create a, let me go back here, we are going to create a bar chart based on what I said, the institution name. So we're going to go here, institution name, and now we're going to go to dynamic measure, and I'll pull it over here to the x-axis. You can see, let me go ahead, dynamic measure, add that as a slicer. And I know I've already done this, so I'm just going to keep clicking through, change it a tile, like this, change it to fall enrollment, and we have this good to go here. And let's see, sort it, changing the sort option here. All right. So we have our fall enrollment by institution name. And we have our dynamic measures over here. Now I can change the title over here, and I will do that, and I'll change the title right there. But what you may notice is on the right-hand side, you have our filters pane. Filters pane can really be dynamic. You can either allow users to use it on a published report and have them come into here and click drop-downs and add fields and filter if you'd like. You can also click this little button here and hide the filter. That doesn't mean the filter doesn't apply. The filter would still apply to the page or all pages or wherever you have it right here in the pane. It just means the user won't be able to see it, right? The developer can, the user won't. So for here, we've done it where our control is 2, meaning private. CY active is 1, meaning the institution is active. And then our state abbreviation is Florida. So remember, we're looking at private institutions in Florida. So that's why we have everything on all pages right here, filtered here. So anyway, we have that. One thing I don't like about this, automatically, it's cutting off a lot of the names. So I'm going to go up here to the y-axis and change this max area width to about 50%. And you can see, now we can see a little more, not everything, but you can always hover over and, see the whole name, but it's a lot better than cutting off most of it. So we have our report a little better there. Format that a bit. And now I want to go into here and be a little obnoxious. And I say that because there's going to be a lot of color combinations, but this is all for fun. So we're going to go into here. And by here, I mean, there's a couple of different places. I'm in the format pane. If you do on object editing, you can go to add your visual, click more options. It'll open up on the side. And then I'm going to go to bars, click right here, this conditional formatting. And remember when I had the institution colors imported in as part of the Power Query and that demo I did at the beginning with our data sets? We're going to change all of the bar colors to those hex codes and the colors that represent those hex codes, I should say. So up here under format styles, we're going to go to field value. And I'm going to click this drop down. What should the field be based? What field should we base this on? Dim institution colors. I'm going to click color here. And it wants to summarize it. You can either choose first or last. Since it's a one-to-one relationship, does not matter if you choose first or last. So I'm just going to choose first. I'll click OK, and voila. So now what we've done is we have the actual hex code. So full disclosure, if you notice something off, I went in and chose a color picture or a color picker on their actual website, and that's what I did. So it was good enough for this exercise. But you can see now everything is related to the color that we have on the data set that we imported there. Pretty spiffy there. I would say this is important to understand. You can set these conditional rules up. That way, if your report refreshes and you have these conditional rules, that rule will also refresh too, especially if you have it set up like this. So this is a pretty important thing to remember. I like to spice it up a little more and, again, get a little more obnoxious. You can change the plot area background, and I will be doing that right here. So I'm going to go over here. It should open. I'm going to choose the logo and change transparency to, I think, 70. Yeah, 70 looks good enough. And we have right here, we have our, the U logo right there. Not that that matters to really anybody else on the call unless you're on my team. So if you're on my team, hey, everybody. We're going to change here the y-axis title. I'm going to get rid of that. That's institution name. And then I want to get rid of the x-axis title as well, because this necessarily won't always be fall enrollment, and we have it up here in this. One thing I also want to do is change this. In my demo, I had this as most recent fall enrollment. So what I want to do is change this title here to another dynamic value. And so I want it to be a field value. Under my dim measure table, I actually added a dynamic title DAX formula, and I'll show you that real quick. I want this to change to that. So we have most recent fall enrollment. And what do I mean by most recent? Well, I need to add another filter here. And I didn't get fancy with this, but you can obviously create a DAX formula to always show the most recent. So if your data does update on week to week, month to month, term to term, whatever that may be, you can create formulas to always show the most recent. For this demo, I'm going to apply to this visual the year, and we're going to do a basic filtering of 2021. Again, it's a demo, but this will always show the most recent fall enrollment right there. And then here we go. So we have our most recent fall enrollment. Voila, we have our first chart that is made right here. Are there any questions, Pete, before I go on to the next chart? That was probably the longest I'll spend on a chart, by the way, because it was setting up the formulas. It was doing all this and walking through some of the things.
Hey, Geoff, we don't have any open questions at the moment, so you're good to go.
All right, so I'll keep rambling here. So we have our bar chart, which is the most recent fall enrollment. And as you can see, if I keep changing this, now it's for most recent 12-month enrollment, whatever it may be. Again, most recent, maybe we want to put the actual year or the actual time frame there. Sure, we can create a DAX formula or DAX calculation and do that right there, and we're good to go. One thing I forgot to add here, and this is personal preference, we have the axis here that shows, but maybe you want to show some data labels. So let me go to data labels, put them on, and we can change the data labels to whatever we'd like. Under values, display units, if we choose none, it'll give you the exact amount. And for this demo, that's what we're going to opt for. The next thing we want to do, everybody loves maps, or at least a lot of people love maps. I love maps. We're going to create a map. And for that map, we're going to go up here. It's pretty simple. We choose the map visual, right? It makes a lot of sense. We're going to go to map and choose map. I'll put it right here. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to add, you can see under build a visual, we have the location, the legend, latitude, longitude, bubble size, and tooltips. For this, we're going to add the latitude and longitude because that's in our data set, part of the dim directory information. I'm going to go up to search that out. I like dragging and dropping. Here, longitude. And here we go. So now we have everything that we could possibly need. It's all plotted right here within this map right here. What we'll then do is go to dynamic measure. Under bubble size, we want this bubble size to change based on the measure we select. So I'm going to drag over here, dynamic measure, and notice, and I could zoom in, but you could see somewhat that these bubble sizes are changing a little bit right there. So depending on what you use, you could see this maybe drastically changing depending on what the metric is. So we have that here. Another thing I'd like to add, under bubbles, you can go to colors, and you guessed it, a little more obnoxious color generation here. I'm going to go to field value, go to institution colors, click color, click OK, and there we go. So now the bubbles are corresponding with the bar chart and the actual institution colors that we've already mapped out in the hex codes in the back end. So we have that here. I'm going to go ahead and change this title to private institutions in Florida. And then we can just change our subtitle here. So I don't have a subtitle, but I will turn that on. And I've created, and I forgot to show you this, but I will show you right now. I created a dynamic subtitle. So I'm going to click dynamic subtitle, click OK. And maybe we change this to size 8 with, italics. That'd be fine. So now every time I change this, as you can probably guess, that dynamic subtitle will change along with it. And how I've created that, so I forgot to show you this before, but how I created these dynamic titles and dynamic subtitles is pretty easy. Click on dynamic title, you can see it's just a concatenate function. We're concatenating the word most recent with our dynamic measure, which again, that's our field parameter that I created. I didn't create that here, I created it before here for ease of use. But that's there. And then dynamic subtitle, again, just another concatenate. And I referenced those, so now everything works when we change the dynamic measure over there. The next thing we want to do, and this is kind of cool. Coming from Tableau, I love the KPI visual within Power BI. I think it's a great way just to show a really big number and really show easy term over term, year over year, period over period change in whatever metric you're evaluating. So I'm going to go ahead and click KPI, and we're going to drag it and put it right here. And I will add in dynamic measure under value. On trend axis, I'm going to add year. So you can see there's only 3 years, right? This works better if you have much more than 3 periods, but within our demo, we only have 3. So here's 1, 2, 3. Right there. And then what I'm going to do for the target. So this is pretty important. Well, you don't need a target. Obviously, you can show the metric. This is going to default to the most recent. But if you want to show the metric and then maybe a target, maybe we all have targets of some sort, you can create a target in the back end. So what I've done here is I actually created another DAX calculation called PY measures. So this is prior year measures. And what I did here, without, I don't want to belabor this point, but this is essentially, we created our own little variable here. This is the maximum year in our data set, -1, because we're looking, our target has to be the prior year. So for this instance, in this demo, that's what works for here. And then what we're going to do, I don't know if Jen's on the call, but Jen Heaton and I were talking. She works at the University of Miami as well. And she implemented something in production that allowed the users to really change the field parameter that was selected. And then this allowed us to change the actual measure that's being referenced in our DAX calculation via the switch function here and then the selected value function and change it. So for this instance, what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, when you select fall enrollment, we want to take the prior year's value for fall enrollment. And that's how we do that with the switch function. And then we have to fully qualify what value we're selecting, which is in the fall enrollment right there. And then it just returns the prior year value. Same thing with everything we select over there. So what I'll do is I'll drag this to target. And you can see, there we go. So our target last year, for instance, let's say our target was something, right? Our target in this case is year-over-year growth in the prior year value. It was 192.19K, and we were up by about 2.33%. And you saw, again, once you get the data set up in a way and you have that calculation, that's why I love the KPI visual. It's very easy to put it on here. You have a trend of information in the back end, you have the current value, you have the previous term or the previous period's value, and then how much you grew by. This is a lot of information condensed into a single visual, and I really like it. So I would strongly recommend it if you don't use it yet. So we have that here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the title. We can change the title here. I'm going to add in the dynamic measure here. There we go. So fall enrollment, and then we can put most recent year at the bottom, but we'll have that there. So now we have 3 visuals, and as you can tell, I'm going through here, everything just automatically changes. It's great. It's hunky-dory. Everything's working really well. One thing I want to do, though, and this is when I was developing this, I figured, oh, we have the map, right? But it's hard to see, like there's not a lot of information conveyed on this map. We really need to have a tooltip here. Maybe we can create a custom tooltip. Well, and I did just that. And rather than recreate it from scratch for everybody, I kept it in here, and I'll walk through how we can create that. But let me show you the end product. So let me zoom in here on an institution. I'll just select this one that's bigger right up here. Near Edgewater. And if I hover over, you can see now we have our custom tooltip, right? Now, I chose just to do this for the demo's sake, but we have Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach. And then we have a little multi-row card there that shows the city, the highest degree offered, and then the web URL. Not that the web URL really does a lot, but I wanted to have that third data point there. But then we also have the trends for this institution we've hovered over for the 12-month enrollment, total fall enrollment, and total conferrals. And also notice that everything is colored based on that institution's color and that hex code. I really wanted to apply that hex code there. And I think that really, some folks may call it redundant, which it is redundant, but I prefer to call it consistency, right? When we're developing a report, we really want our users to have a consistent experience across. So if they see that blue, right, they see that blue for Embry-Riddle, it's represented in other charts there as well. So that way they're used to that blue. Or in our case for UM, our orange, right? We wanted to see that orange across. We want that to be distinct to whatever we're hovering over. And so that's why I decided to do that. All right, that's the tooltip. Now, how did I do that? That's a larger question. So I'm going to load this up here, map tooltip. And as you notice, when you're developing reports, you can right click and hide the page too. What that does, when you publish it, right, to your either report server or the service, it will hide that from the end user. We don't want the user to have map tooltip, right, as a selection on the left-hand side. We want them to interact with it. But we do want them to access the tooltip via that functionality within the map. So we have to have that over here. And when you create a new page, I'll just create a new page and I'll show you. Over here on the format pane, you can see page information, and you can name it whatever you'd like, and then page type. So we have standard, tooltip, and drill through. Now, you do not have to change the page type to a tooltip for it to be a tooltip. I just did because I like the compact nature of it. But if we change it to tooltip, you'll notice the dimensions get a lot smaller, and then we have to build everything within this little area right there. And then show tooltip on, you can show the tooltip on the specific fields there. That's what you do, and then you can build off of that. I'm going to exit out of that, and I'll sort of reverse engineer what we've already built. So as you can see, we have our tooltip. I've named it map tooltip, and I'm showing tooltip on really any visual, at least for now, it'll default to this, that has longitude and latitude instituted in there. And you can say show tooltip on or when it's either summarized or used as a category. It needs to be used as a category within the map visual. It can't be summarized. So that's why, this is defaulted to used as a category there. And what we end up doing is this is simply a card. So we load in a card here. And yes, we could use the new card visual. But there's only one element that we're selecting here, so I just chose the classic card visual. And what I ended up doing here, I'm going to click on this, we can go into the call out value, the color here. Again, I can remove the conditional formatting or apply it again. It's the color that we've selected on institution colors again. It's just that color, and it changes the text value there for the card based on whatever we've selected. And then we have our multi-row right here. So the multi-row card. And what I ended up doing here is, let me remember precisely. Yes. A lot of customization here, right? Like I changed the sort of formatting here from a darker black to really a lighter gray here, because we want the city and we want the actual data to stand out. We don't want everybody to focus on city. We want them to focus on the city, right? The city that the institution's a part of. So I changed that here. A lot of custom formatting that you can find out in the format pane there. And I changed this accent bar. Again, it could be, I had width 2. You can make it a lot wider. I just chose 2 for a little subtle approach. And again, you can change the conditional formatting color to whatever you have there, and really change it to whatever you have in your report. So if you have it based on a metric, it can be really gradient at that point. If you want to highlight those that have a high metric of choice, the metric du jour, then you can do that as well. And then I actually have 3 different line charts here representing the 3 different metrics. And so what I did here is, oops, not trend line. Walk you through some of these here, turn off. Under lines, you can go to apply series all, line style dashed, and join type round. Stroke width is 2. If we change that, you can see it gets really thick. Kept that as 2 because, again, it's a smaller visual. Line type linear, step, or smooth. So smooth is kind of fun. I will say, if you're looking for exact visualizations, really pixel perfect to the data point, linear is probably going to be what you want. Smooth is really more like the Google Analytics style, where it looks aesthetically pleasing, but you really can't tell much of a difference between 2 different data points if they're close, especially depending on the scale. And then you have step here, which is essentially literally steps. So you can use that as well. But I chose to use linear. And then, of course, I had to do it. Go to data labels. Then under color for the data label, we had to change the color to the institution colors there. And I did that. Again, consistency. So we have the institution color here, here, and then here for the data labels. And then everything just flows together. So then if I go back to page 1, what we're creating, and I click on our map visual here, and I go to properties. So not under visual, but I go to properties. Under tooltips, I can turn these off. So if I turn it off, nothing shows. I wanted something to show them. So if we go back over here, turn the tooltips on, you can see, okay, is it a report page? Is it default? If I change it to default, it's just your default visual that you'll typically see in Power BI. So if I hover over here, it has institutional name, fall enrollment. Not terrible, but I wanted it to spice it up a little more. And you can change your page to auto, which will automatically say, oh, what tooltip pages have you created? And how are we relating? Remember that latitude and longitude field that we created? That's essentially, it's going to auto try to pick that. If you're creating a lot of tooltips, avoid auto. I think it'll just create confusion. And explicitly choose map tooltip. So whatever page you've created. So now we're saying, hey, on this visual, pull up this map tooltip for us. And that's what we're going to do. And now that it's selected, it's working again. Here we go. And as you can see, import storage mode's a breeze. Everything loads really quickly, and it just works really well there. The colors, you can tell, are very distinct, and they're the colors of the institution. So there's the tooltip. So any questions about tooltips? I know I belabor that point, but I think tooltips in terms of interactivity with a report really breathe a ton of life. You can have folks drill through with tooltips. You can have folks referencing these tooltips and give additional information depending on what it is, especially if they don't need to print it out and they're just wondering what that data point represents. Utilize these custom tooltips. I think that it can really be a game changer for some reports on Power BI.
Hey, Geoff, we didn't have any specific questions about tooltip pages, but there was a question about the map visual, which was, are we required to submit latitude and longitude, or are we also able to give a physical address? And it looks like you're using the basic map visual, which I believe has a location property, which will allow you to put in a physical address and get a result back.
Right. You
So
can put in, that's exactly right. And I'm trying to pull up the
hit the
builder.
plus button on the far right side, the plus button there, and turn on. Oh, it's not there.
It's aired
Yeah,
out on me.
I'm looking for the data.
Yeah. Well,
Let's see.
well, I mean, the answer is yeah. Here, let's go ahead and just create another one, see if it works. Here we go.
There it
So yeah,
is.
location.
Location.
So let's do that. Let's go into oh, I don't know the field name under address. Probably address. But you know, we
Yeah.
concatenate, right? Put address, city, state, all of that. Let's add that here. I'm going to keep adding things. So you can add in, let's see, where's city. And hopefully this works. You can add in the location, but
Yeah, I'll tell you that it's not perfect because I mean you can already see that there's one location that's apparently in southeastern England,
right.
which doesn't seem quite right. But you know, and I have seen cases before where it thinks that you know cities in Australia are actually located in the middle of Germany. You know, definitely latitude and longitude is the more precise way to do it when you're working at least with this particular map visual. I will say though that not all map visuals in Power BI are created equal. Some of them are better than others. The Bing map visual, the one that he's using, was the standard for a long time. It's slowly being replaced by the Azure map visual.
Mm.
And I had some issues with the Azure map visual, so I wasn't using it for a while. There's also an ArcGIS visual, which some people are very fond of because it has
Mm.
a lot of layers that you can add in with some additional data layers that are really interesting. There's the shape map visual. The shape map visual is really interesting, but it doesn't really get into very granular locations, but it does allow you to create custom shape maps, to create like custom map of the world, custom map of the United States or your state or all the counties. You could even do a shape map of your campus.
Mm.
So there are a lot of good options, but I just wanted to let you know that you know they don't all they're not all perfect. There's always like some you know benefits to using one over the other.
Shape maps, and I will say, somebody at our institution, I'm not sure she's on either, but she works with this sustainability data. She actually demoed for us a shape map she created in Power BI of the different buildings on campus, right? You can pull that up, you can click on the building, and then it filters the report for that building. A very nice touch, right, to being able to filter to specific buildings and see what the sustainability metrics look like for that building. So if you, presuming everybody on here has a campus of some sort, or at least most do, you can build something like that and then click on that and then develop metrics around that building. And it's a really great UX there for folks. All right, hopefully this is back. Is it back? There we go. The build visuals back. Okay. All right. So next thing we want to do is create another visual. This is just going to be, again, redundant. It's going to be a matrix visual. So I'm going to click matrix here, and I'm going to drag over this, resize it. It's not perfect, but it'll do. And I'm going to bring in the name again. So we want to build in name on rows. Columns, we want year. So I'm going to click year, columns, and then values. We want our dynamic measure. Again, this dynamic measure is used everywhere. If we're going to build it, we might as well use it, right? So we have this right here, and then we have our institution name. Let me make this a little wider, make sure stuff fits. I don't really want the rows total here, so I'm going to edit this, go to more options. Oops, sorry, columns. There we go. So now we have our dynamic measure here. I'm going to choose to turn the title on, change the title to our dynamic title. And there you go. We want the, sorry, this is the live demo portion. We don't want the dynamic title. We just want the measure. It's not necessarily the most recent. Right there, fall enrollment. So this is fall enrollment by whatever we like. Again, I'm going to change the see, cell elements. So this is a matrix visual, right? So we have cell elements. And so what we can do here is, and I'm not going to walk through all three, but if you were to build this yourself, you'd have to do this. Under the cell elements, you can now change different formatting settings for these cells. So the series based on fall enrollment, or when I change this to 12-month enrollment, this will change to, click on that again, it'll change to 12-month enrollment, as you can see right here. And then we can change the different formatting settings for that. For here, I'm just going to change the font color to the institution color. So again, you have gradient, you have rules, you can set up specific rules, similar to Excel, right? Conditional formatting is pretty useful here. Change this institution color to color. And now we have, again, similar colors right here. And if I were to select, let's say, University of Miami, click that. Notice everything, these two filter, this highlights the bar. I can change this if I go to Format and Edit Interactions. I can change this to filter the bar, but then there's only one bar. I kind of like highlighting, so I'm going to keep it right here. But again, Format, Edit Interactions. You can edit which visuals interact with each other there. Get out of there. But yeah, everything just filters automatically. So you can see, and it's very quick, right? Now we're in Coral Gables here. It's Lake Osceola, somewhere around there. We can see that. But if I really wanted to go crazy, I could say, okay, hey, change these. Let's add data bars. Let's add background color. Let's add icons, right? I wouldn't suggest ever doing that, but I'm showing this off. Like, you can do a lot of different things here. You can change the icons based on the conditions you've set up and everything there. For now, let's not go too crazy. Let's just change the font colors for that. All right, so now there's three charts, right? Our three main charts, again, that we wanted to create have been created here. And they interact with each other. If we click on this, I don't know what I just clicked on. There, Ultimate Medical Academy is what I clicked on. You can see everything is filterable by different charts there. Click on Nova Southeastern. And again, everything's filterable. So great. We have some redundancy here. We have some metrics that are looked at in different ways. And we have the map. I love maps. Now we need to add a title. But before we do that, one thing I wanted to point out is we can change this background color. If I go to canvas background, I can change this to say a light blue, transparency to 75. Yeah, let's do 75. And then we can start adding additional shapes here. So if I wanted to insert a shape, I could go here, insert a specific shape here. I'll do a rectangle. And what I do for that is I want people to group their different visuals together. I forget what the exact styling is called. If anybody knows in the chat, please let me know. But essentially, there's I don't even want to keep talking because it's going to make me sound ignorant. But essentially, the styling method of grouping things together. There's a specific person that is it Gestalt principles. There we go. So the principles here of looking at grouping data, it helps people understand, okay, these things may go together, right? And then you can align with how the eye goes within your report. If they want to read from left to right or top to bottom or whatever it may be, group them, path that visual for them. For this, we're just going to group things together how we have it set up. So we inserted a shape over here, and I'm going to go to size and style, change the background. Well, we can add a background if we really want to. What I was going to do is get rid of that shape and cheat a little bit. I've already created these shapes over here, so I'm just going to copy and paste. That's another wonderful thing with Power BI. If you don't know that, I just did Control-C. So I selected the shape I had over here, did Control-C, and then I'm going to do Control-V right over here. And you can see it not only pasted it in the exact same spot that it had in the other page there. So if you want to ensure consistency, make sure you're copying and pasting. It'll just make sure that everything's copied and pasted in the same spot. For you, so this, as you may notice, is in front of our floating objects there, our visuals. I'm going to send this to the back. And send to the back. And there we go. So now we have these visuals grouped together. Drag it down a little bit. We don't need it so far up. And then I'll make this a little smaller. There we go. Now I can remove the background on these visuals, but we're running out of time, so I'm not going to worry about doing that. And then if I had more time, I would create little groupings here, copy and paste, and just add it for these different visuals here, so that way they're all grouped together. But we're not going to do that right now. And what we're going to do is insert a title. So we have this nice report, but what's the title, right? Like, what is the whole title here? Do we know what we're looking at? Right now, no, we don't. We need a title. So I'm going to click here, click Insert Text Box. I'll drag it up to the top, resize it, and I'm going to drag this over here for something we're going to create a little bit. And I'll put in, oops, let's see, iPads metrics, private. Oh, by the way, if you're moving from Power BI to, from Tableau to Power BI, notice there's spell check here. Very, very useful. Tableau does not have that, at least the last time I checked. In Florida, select all this, bold it up, change the size 18, maybe put it in the middle, and there we go. And now what I want to do is add a subtitle. So it's not just the private institutions in Florida, it's specific metrics that we're looking at over the past 3 years. So one way I found to do this, and if you know of a better way, let me know, but under value, you can add a dynamic value. So it has to be again, a summarization or an aggregation of something. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the minimum dynamic measure. I'm going to type that in, I'll press enter, and then eventually, hopefully, it will come up with the dynamic measure that we have selected over here. Come on. There we go, 12-month enrollment. So I'm going to click save. And then I'll add up here, 12-month enrollment over the previous 3 years. And again, you can make that dynamic if you'd like. But now we have that. If I change this to fall enrollment, notice everything is consistent. That value then changes based on what you select. So rather than having all 3 metrics in all these different reports or different visuals here, which takes up a lot of space, and space is very premium here when we're developing reports, create these field parameters. That way it's 3 distinct reports in one, right? And you have these users that are going in here, and it's delineated. It's very easy. And if they want to print it off, sure, they can print it off, and everything is explicit of what they're looking at. So now we have here, if I go into the visual properties, change the background to off, you'll notice, I probably resize this a little more, but say la vie. You can see here, hey, the background now matches here. We could turn the background off of everything. What I want to do next, and probably last here, because it's 212, is I want to add in a sort of a filter pane, right? We want to add in a filter pane to allow users to create this. So I'm going to cheat, go here, create this right like this. And this uses bookmarks, but I will show you what that is when we're done if we have some time. I'm going to paste in that filters pane. It's going to go to the back. And you will see me cheating a lot right here because I've already done this over here. Essentially what I've done now is I'm starting to organize things. I'm going to organize, measures, filters over here. Come on, hold on. I'm going to just add in a text box called measures. And this lets the user know, hey, you can change these things a bit. Oh, I pasted it over here. Great. Pasted the whole thing, which is not what we wanted. But again, I am cheating, so that's kind of my fault. So I'll just add it in here myself. And when you go to text box, I'll click on call measures, bold it over here. Drag this down. I want to change this title. Get rid of it. Slicer header. All right, so we have our measures right here. And then we can add in additional filters. So I'm going to add in a slicer or 2 up here at the top, and we'll call these filters. Everybody knows what a filter is, right? Technically, this is a slicer, and so are these. End users maybe don't really care about the distinction between a filter, a slicer, or anything like that. So we'll use language that is comfortable to them, and they'll know what the function of these little drop downs are. So the first thing I used was institutional category. I'll click on value label. And of course, we will reformat this to slicer header, call this institutional category. Change this to it's a little smaller. Find the values here. We want these values in our drop downs to be small. Slicer settings, drop down like that. So now we have institutional category, right, like this. And then what I'll do is I'm just going to copy and paste this because I like the sizing there. And I'm going to change this institutional category to the highest degree offered. Like that. And I'll want to change the title there. Highest degree offered. Like that. And you can see we can then filter everything based on that. And then what I had below, just to give it some appeal, and I'll show you how that works because I don't want to set it up from scratch right here because we don't have a ton of time. But I used bookmarks, right? So what you can see right over here is we have this little menu, right? Collapse menu. This is literally a button that you can insert and it reverts to a bookmark, and I'll show you what that is in a second. But if I click this right here, it collapses the menu or expands it. Not really useful for this, just wanted to show off that we can do that. I think it's when we have production reports, utilizing bookmarks and utilizing this sort of menu here, especially if there's a ton of filters you want, sometimes it can take up a lot of space, right, on our report. And again, space is at a premium. So if you have sort of this collapsible structure in mind, you can do something like that. And keep in mind the logo here, again, personalization, the logo expands out and you see everything. But you can then filter by the institution name, institutional category, and then collapse this back in. How did we do that? Well, we created bookmarks. And if we go to the bookmarks pane, all a bookmark is essentially is a state. It's a state, a visual state of what the report is. So this is the hide state. Again, we're hiding that. This is the show state. And so what you can do is if we can add a bookmark here. So what I'll do over here, and I'll show you how to add a bookmark. It might not make much sense in this demo, but I think bookmarks are very powerful, especially, again, I'll belabor this point a little more. If you have a report, right, and there's a specific department within your college or school that wants to look at a way to view data, you can create a bookmark for them. And what that is, on the service, they can go up to the bookmark, and instead of selecting 4, 5, 6 different filters and changing the data or the charts the way they want it to consistently, they can click on that bookmark and everything will go to that specific visual state right there. And then they can even subscribe to that visual state if they really want to. But it's a way to make things a little more consistent. So if I went here and I changed highest degree offered to associate's degree. All right, so only a couple show. I'm going to add a bookmark here. And I'm going to call this associate's degree, right, like that. Now, if I click on hide and show, everything is back to normal or what that visual state was. But if I click on associate's degree, it will go here. In this case, it changed tabs because remember, we had it bookmarked for this tab, and it remembers this filter that we had right here. All right, so use bookmarks, and that's all this is a bookmark that we're changing from hide to show. And how we do that is I'm going to click on this little icon here. This is actually an image. So we go to insert image, and I'll demo it real quick. I know we got 12 minutes, so I'm trying to hurry. Click on image here. In this case, we had, what is this, menu open, or I'll click menu open. Like this. It's an image that we got. I think this is a free Google image. So on the Google icons, you can download these for free. So I did not take anybody's stuff. Click format there. And then under here, action. So we can add an action here. Click action. Change a bookmark. It can be a page navigation, Q&A. Haven't done that much, but that's a promising feature there. It could be a web URL, apply all slicers, or clear all slicers. So we obviously chose bookmark there, and we just had those different filter or the different images, apply the bookmark that we select. And that's all that is right there. One other thing as I was doing this is I want to show you all this, and I think this makes sense. If you do have a lot of slicers on a report, and we have some reports within UM that have a lot of slicers. Wish we didn't. but we do because it's got to be customizable for a lot of people. We rely upon direct query within rather than import storage mode because of our security policies at the university and all of our security. If you may have catch the last user group meeting, our security policies are baked into our data warehouse. So we have to rely upon direct query for a lot of our enterprise reports. What that means is if we have a report that has 12 slicers, each time we change something, those slicers may have to load again, and it becomes a query bottleneck. If you go to buttons up here and then click on apply all slicers or clear all slicers, it will load either one, whichever one you clicked on, these specific buttons there. And that can be changed within the the button action as well. But essentially what this does is if I go here, click on this institution, and then I want a different category, and then I want highest degree offered. These combinations probably won't work, full disclosure, but I can then click apply all slicers, and then it applies everything all at the same time. So rather than having to have people wait for each time they select something and go through and take, I don't know, 45 seconds, they can select it, it loads really quickly, and then they click apply all slicers to apply everything all at once. So that limits the number of queries you're sending to the database or throughout the Power BI semantic model, and it does improve performance there. And sometimes, if you only have 3 slicers, maybe you don't do that, right? In this case, I wouldn't do that, not a great UX. But if you have a lot of slicers and folks are asking for this feature, that's how you do it, is you go to here, buttons, apply all slicers or clear all slicers. Really, it could be any button at all. And then you can just change the action there on that button to that functionality. And if I click clear all slicers, you can see it goes back and it does what it says, which is great. So it clears all slicers. So 9 minutes left. Essentially at this point, all we have to do is add in these little groupings here. I'm going to change this back. We can add in the groupings, just a little, the formatting details here. I don't want to bore people with the formatting details, but essentially all we'd have to do is go into here, change whatever we want about it over here in the formatting pane, and just customize it the way you want to. I'd probably update the size here a little bit and add a little more here into the filter pane menu. But once that's done, we have our report. It's ready to go. I would then click publish. So I have it all right here. Again, this works well. If I click 12-month enrollment, apply all slicers, it will then apply everything similar to how we did on page 1. I'll click publish, and then of course we have to save it. But once you save it, it publishes, or another menu will come up asking you to publish to specific workspaces. Don't want to show you our internal workspaces because they are linked to our security, so I don't want to do that and betray anybody's trust. But once you do that, you select it. You can even choose your own personal workspace. However, that's only for you and your playground, and then it publishes. So you're good to go there. So that is a Power BI report from scratch, soup to nuts, with iPads data. Once this updates, by the way, once we get the new updated iPads information, all we'd have to do is save it to whatever drive you want to save it to, connect to it again, and then add it to the Power Query in the back end to the union statement that I had at the beginning of a lot of those queries. Then it refreshes, and we're good to go. Similar things can be done with SQL queries and such, and we're actually going to be looking into doing incremental refreshes for some internal things as well. So not to get into that a little more, but there's, this is really, these are the quote unquote basics, some of the features that are offered to us, but we haven't even touched the surface with all the things that we can do. And hopefully for some of you, this introduced some new concepts to Power BI in terms of formatting, in terms of some of the bells and whistles that you can do within Power BI.